Welcome, everyone, to our touch point today, 14 days to thrive in these uncertain times, which is challenging to do and difficult to imagine. So particularly if you are in a place, in a state where things are changing really rapidly, whether that's a full shutdown or if you're here in Virginia, our schools just closed for the rest of the academic year. And it's amazing to me to think about how even 10 days ago, we were just processing the changes that had come to us then. And now, in addition to that, we have another wave of trying to process another level of change, not just disappointment around kind of the things that we expected to be happening in our life, but for many of us, as I've asked my crew and my tribe what they're disappointed in, it's a whole range of experiences from I'm missing my first race to I had to change drastically what my wedding is going to look like, or my wedding's been postponed, or I'm dealing with a long-standing disappointment around pregnancy, or I lost my job. And we are entering into a time where, like I said yesterday, we're all having a shared experience, all of which we've never had before. And so we all have to step up, particularly as grownups who are, if you have children or students in your life, like we have to step up, not only for one another as grownups, but also for the kids and students in our life who are experiencing this time alongside of us. And so we've got these layers and these levels of not only our own anxiety, fear, frustration, disappointment that we bring to the table, but also trying to help manage that for our household and for our circles. All of us have a circle, whether they're actually with you 6 feet apart or whether they're apart from you right now. We are all trying to manage as best we can. And it felt like with the announcement yesterday and with just the rapid changing pace of this like continued shutdown and the ramifications of that in all of our lives, from how it's changing our daily life right now to the fears, the real fears that we have and anxieties about our future, whether that's our job security, the economy, et cetera, what's going to happen in the future. It's a lot to manage right now. And so I just want to take some time to offer you some thoughts and hear from you about any questions or comments that you have around disappointment, but how we can manage our disappointment in a way that can be productive and create growth over time rather than stunt or shut us down or create these outlets for negative coping behaviors, because we've got these feelings and we have to do something with them. We want to return to homeostasis because, why not have a biology lesson as well? We all want to return to that natural balanced state. And so when we have a state of vigilance, a state of negativity coming over us, we're looking for ways to cope with it. And if it's not one way to cope, it's going to be another. And because we're probably going to be in this for a while, this is a chance for all of us to level up in those coping skills, not only for us, but also in the way that we help others. So when I think about disappointment, the definition that I would give it is your expectations not meeting your reality. And hello, none of our realities are what we thought that they would be. So in some ways, this is a shared collective disappointment. We're all experiencing our expectations not meeting a reality. Now, a lot of times in a therapeutic practice and a counseling practice, when we talk about disappointment, we often are talking about, did you have unrealistic expectations? But that's not the case right now. That's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with realistic expectations. It's realistic to think that our kids will be in school. It's realistic if you're a senior in high school or college to expect those rites of passages to come. Perhaps your job felt really secure and it's gone all of a sudden. It was realistic to think that you were going to have that job. So we're not dealing right now with needing to manage unrealistic expectations. We actually have to deal with managing a unrealistic reality that we didn't expect to have. And so that kind of changes the game a little bit. It's not that we can't learn from those expectations, but it's good and right and healthy to have expectations and hope for life. But when those get pulled out from underneath you, it can be even more challenging because expectations not only create sort of a timeline, but also a vision. So if you're a senior in high school, you had a vision of graduating. It's the same vision that you've had year over year as you've watched your friends, your siblings, your family graduate. And so you were processing in your mind a timeline for change. And you were, whether you knew it or not, you were preparing yourself for a timeline for change. When you resign from a job, you are processing a new vision and you're preparing yourself for a timeline for change. So even though you experience disappointments and loss along the way, you've kind of controlled that disappointment and loss. Now, some of us have experienced deep disappointment over things we could not control, whether it was the death of a loved one that we didn't expect, or the loss of a relationship or a job or a future or a marriage. Actually, we're probably more equipped because of going through that. If you grew from that experience, you are more equipped right now to deal and handle this situation than less. But if you haven't had an out of control disappointment come into your life yet in your life, then this is all new for you. It's all brand new. So what I want to offer you is that when you have a vision of what will be and a timeline of how that might happen, and all of that gets pulled out from underneath of you, you sort of have a reaction to that. And you can turn inward with that, and that kind of creates this like shame and failure, which is less sort of known right now in this situation because none of us expected this. We didn't bring it on. Or you can turn outward with it with a lot of anger and blame. But either way, if you turn inward, if you turn outward, what you're actually experiencing right now is grief. Grief is when we lose something. And when you've lost what you thought your vision and timeline would look like, it is like grief. It's like a death. And you've lost the death of a future that you expected. And you've lost the death of a timeline that you thought that you would be on. And one of the worst things to do right now, please listen real closely. Ready? I'm going to get close. One of the worst things you can do right now is act like this isn't a big deal. Like if you lost what you wanted out of your spring sports season, for your life, that's a big deal. If you lost your job, for your life, that's a big deal. So we don't need to compare our losses right now. And that's kind of a tendency we have, particularly as parents, to be like, hey, it's not that bad. Think about the people who have it worse. That's actually not helpful to anyone, including yourself right now. That is not a helpful way to go. And oftentimes we do this to ourselves. We tell ourselves, well, it's not that bad. Someone has it worse. It doesn't help right now, because what you're experiencing is loss and grief isn't moved by that kind of rationale. Like that does not help with grief. What helps with grief is to feel what you're feeling. I mean, at the very sort of base level, it's actually allowing yourself to process and to feel what you're feeling. So if you can feel what you're feeling and just let yourself express some of the things for some of the time right now. And that may mean that like you're just not great for a couple of days because you're trying to reset all of these expectations. But I want to encourage you to lean into those feelings rather than away, because they have such great things to teach us about what we really care about. And even right now with school, if you're a student who was moving towards graduation or in college or high school, think about what it is that you're really sad about. Like really let yourself be sad. Many of us have never learned to allow ourselves to be sad. We have been taught, whether implicitly or explicitly, by our parents, by our authority figures, by our culture, particularly if you've grown up a boy or you're a man, it can be hard to express sadness or vulnerability because that's not our normal MO. And it actually, dads, it's actually helpful for your kids to see that you're sad too, because it actually models for them that it's okay to be sad and that life is not going to fall apart if we express vulnerability or weakness. Now, that's, of course, within limits. We're not asking our children to take care of us as parents, but expressing vulnerability, expressing empathy is really helpful right now. The most important thing we can do for each other while we're managing disappointments of any kind is express empathy. Just say, I try to feel what the person is feeling based on the shoes that they're in. It does not help to rationalize it away. Now, we can't always stay there, but most of us are so scared of the power of negative emotions because we've never had a safe place to express them that we start to go down toward them, and we actually think that we're about to jump off a cliff, like into this abyss that we will never emerge from. That somehow if we allow ourselves to be sad, we're going to sink so deep and so low that we're never going to come back out. And so what we do is we start going down, and then we use different coping mechanisms to bring us back out. Down here is the growth. Down here is the fullness of life, but we start to approach down here and we're so terrified of these feelings that we've never felt that we jump back out and we start to cope in negative ways. And all those emotions come out sideways. It can come out with frustration and anger with one another. We begin to cope with all the over things that we do: overeating, over drinking, over shopping, over arguing, over TV watching, whatever. Like all of that is the over stuff that we use because we don't want to go down into this place. But I want to tell you, as someone who has gone to the bottom and emerged, you will find the bottom. There will be a bottom. There will be an end to your tears if you just let yourself lament. This idea of lamenting is a deep sense of grief and mourning. And I know some of you are shutting yourself off right now because you're thinking, I'm not allowed to be this upset about the thing that I'm upset about. But you didn't pick the life that you're in. If you're upset about what you're upset about, that's a big thing for you. And we don't need to compare each other's losses, compare each other's grief. Letting yourself feel, I'm going to tell you in just a moment how this is so productive, what this is actually going to do for you in the long term, that we can emerge. Remember, this is all about emerging stronger. So what this can do for you is create something in you that you have not had before if you've never allowed yourself to go down. And going down into that grief, it may look like tears for you. It may look like needing to kind of journal or write a little bit about what you really are missing and what you are lamenting about what you expected out of life. It may look like drawing or listening to music or taking a walk. It's all of these ways that we just allow ourselves to feel. And we need to allow our kids to feel too, and to remember that we all feel grief differently. For some, it might look like being withdrawn or shut down. For others, it might mean processing verbally a lot. And both of those are okay. We don't have to make it be one way, if that makes sense. But what we can do, particularly if you're more sort of emotionally intelligent, you've been through this, is you can name some feelings that your children or students might be feeling. You can just throw some ideas out to them, like, do you think that you're feeling frustrated? Do you think that you're feeling angry? Do you think that you're feeling regretful? You can throw out some emotions that they might be feeling without asking them to feel them. But even if they don't respond to you, they're listening and they're processing what you are saying, and that alone could be very helpful. So feel what you feel, let yourself feel, express all the things for some of the time. And then after that, don't shut down those out of control feelings. You can just name those feelings and avoid minimizing. Avoid things like it's not that bad or deflecting other people's emotions by saying something like you shouldn't feel that way. That's not that helpful right now. And if you put yourself in that person's shoes, it's never helpful when someone tells you to stop feeling the way you feel. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had anyone do that, but if you can draw back into having an experience with someone where basically they told you it's not okay to feel the way you feel, not helpful. So let's allow ourselves to feel for a day or two or three before we kind of embrace this new reality. And remember that some of us get there quicker than others, but I want to remind you, some of us get there quicker than others because we're trying to avoid feeling. So this is a chance for everyone to grow, including you, whether you're the parent or not. This is a chance to grow. So don't shut down the feelings. Express the empathy and presence at first. And remember that everybody experiences this differently. We experience loss and disappointment differently. Next thing, I want you to expect to feel uneven. You may experience conflicting emotions and simultaneously conflicting emotions all at one time. You may feel sad and angry at the same time. You may feel some relief. You may be experiencing, there's things about this life that's actually really good. Like we were having like a hot breakfast for the third morning, in a row. And one of my friends was asking me, is this the kind of breakfast that you always make? I'm like, no, this is definitely not what happens. There's some relief when we're just kind of cloistered and home. But you might also, with that relief, be feeling anxiety. So at the same time, you're holding together conflicting emotions. You may be feeling a loss right now, as we've talked about, and also feeling filled up. You may be experiencing deeper connections and more richer conversations, even virtually, because all of a sudden we're all realizing what matters to us. So you may feel very uneven, and that's okay. What's great about humanity, being made in the image of God, is God has given us the ability to express a full range of emotions and hold them together Even when they seem conflicting, we can still hold them together. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And this is a place where you become a deeper person, and you can help your kids do that as well. You can give them permission to have fun and also be sad, to feel grieved and also feel relieved. It's okay to feel all of those things. And when you offer them that popcorn of feeling words, you may help them access some of that, even if they don't let you know at first. Remember, a lot of the long-term gains of this season, we're not going to know right now. A lot of what is being sown into our souls, to our family's souls, to our nation, and to our world, we're not going to know right now. But that's why we're just sort of being faithful to what God is putting in front of us for now. So expect to feel uneven. Continue to give yourself space to feel the way you do for at least a period of time. Right now. But also, I like to say for at least a period of time each day. If you don't vent your feelings, they will come out sideways. But you also don't want to drown in your feelings. But here's the thing about drowning in your feelings. The level of depth that creates drowning for you is different for every person. So for some people for whom this is new and scary and challenging to feel all of this anxiety, their depth may be here. Your depth may be here. Like you're fine moving through those emotions. You are swimming in those emotions. You feel great. But someone around you may have a much shallower well right now. So let it be okay. But we don't want to drown in our feelings. We don't want to allow our feelings to not allow us to get out of bed or to be present or to be able to take a few good steps of health every day. If that's where you're at, that's a different place to be. That's on the way to depression, and we can talk about that another time. But what we're talking about right now is just crisis moment disappointment and what to do with it. So let's not drown in the feelings, but I love to say, let's just give ourselves time to feel bad every day. And then when we're done, we're going to put that away. I love the mental image. I used to tell my clients, I want you to take all of that and I want you to put it in a drawer and shut the drawer, and we can open it again tomorrow. We're not going to process everything we feel right now. This is where those art forms, writing, listening to music, doing art, are ways to vent and cope, even when you're not quite able to put words to it. That can help you create a coping mechanism. So last thing, when you're ready to move out of that place of just emotion, rather than asking the question, why did this happen? Or blaming anyone or being angry at anyone, ask yourself, what am I learning from this? What does this teach me about what's important to me? What am I learning in this season? What am I learning in my disappointment? What am I learning in this loss? What is this teaching me about what's important to me? Because some of us who are older realize that this time will pass. It feels like it's going to last forever. But the younger you are, the longer this feels, the more permanent it feels. So those of us who are a little more seasoned need to know, we need to be asking ourselves, what am I learning right now? How am I growing right now? And then gently shepherding our family, our children, our students through that same experience. What are you learning right now about what's important to you? Because this season will end and we'll go back to normal at some point, but you can go back to normal as a different person. Connecting your loss to the experience of others may create in you a deeper sense of purpose than you've ever experienced in your life. When you connect your current disappointment to compassion for others, you may find a whole new calling is waiting for you after this. Last week, I had my first flash of panic. I am not really a panicky person. I'm not generally anxious like in my awareness, although I'm very anxious underneath the surface. And I was in the grocery store and I was looking at the empty shelves, which I've never seen before in my entire life as a 42-year-old mom now of 3 children who is in the grocery store multiple times a week. I've never experienced that. And I looked at the shelves and I felt this panic. Like I felt this moment that was like, what if I couldn't feed my kids? Like, what if I didn't have money to feed my kids? And it was like this moment, and this is what I'm talking about when you go into the depths, this moment of fullness where I felt connected to humanity in a different way. Because there are moms around the world every day who panic about how they're going to feed their children. And it's not to lessen or minimize my experience. It's actually to use this moment of experience to connect me to humanity and to recognize, oh my gosh, this moment, this temporary moment of panic, this temporary moment of difficulty in my country is a permanent moment for so many people in the world. And what does that do? It grows me deeper. It makes me stronger. It gives me more compassion. It may change the trajectory of the purpose of my life when we come out of this time. It makes me pray differently. It makes me love differently. It makes me think about how I want to prioritize my money and my time differently. If we will allow ourselves to engage with the feeling and connect it to humanity, anyone here felt more compassion for people who are homebound? Like, have you thought about, since you've been home, that there are people who are like this all the time? And the rest of us are just buzzing around our daily lives, and they are struggling in the isolation of being at home all the time. Does that change the way you think about how you want to re-engage with the world? That's how we make this time purposeful. That's how your disappointment and loss, although it will not go away, it's worth validating, it can be used for good. And we can walk each other into that process of really paying attention to, what am I most disappointed about? What am I most drawn to? What do I most value? And how could God use that to connect me to humanity in new and beautiful ways that make my life more free, more full, more purposeful as we come out of this season together? So thank you so much, you guys, for your time today.